Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2015 movie titled The Revenant. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the first scene, we meet Hugh Glass and his son Hawk while hunting. We then proceed to their camp, which is headed by Captain Henry, who is preparing for their departure following a successful hunt and collection of animal skins to be sold as leather. The hunters appear to be doing well until one of them is shot with an arrow, which Glass and Hawk hear and follow back to the camp. They are being attacked by a local Arikara Indian tribe. When one of them tries to flee, he is shot. Glass appears during a skirmish and advises them to return to the boat. One Indian chokes him, but he survives. He summons Hawk as the action heats up. The hunters are gathering their belongings to return to their boat, but the Indians would not let them go in peace. Some of the hunters observed will be unable to make it, and those that do make it to the boat will sail away as the Arikara seize control of the camp. The Arikara chief reveals that some white men abducted his daughter, Pa'aka, and now they are hunting her. They are now on the boat, attending to the injured, when Glass informs them that they must alter direction and leave the boat to get through the mountains. Fitzgerald rejects the suggestion, but Captain Henry concurs with Glass' plan, leading to the abandonment of the boat. Fitzgerald expresses his dissatisfaction with the decision, asserting that his objective is to reach their fort and receive payment for his skins. He begins to annoy Hawk because of his race, as his mother was Indian, and the attack was carried out by Indians, which enrages Hawk. Fitzgerald also insults Glass due to his dissatisfaction with his plan, but Glass remains silent and later warns Hawk to remain calm in the face of Fitzgerald's wrath. The Arikara Indians have also found the abandoned boat. Fitzgerald questions Glass about Hawk's mother as the party heads off in the morning. After some time, when they stop for a break, Glass awakens in the middle of the night, and he advises Hawk to lead the crew to the left as he continues spying around the forest. Suddenly, he gets a peculiar feeling and stands to pull his rifle, hoping to see bear cubs, but a giant adult bear attacks him unsuspecting and begins to rip him apart, prompting Glass to pretend to be dead while checking to see whether he is dead and then leaving. When he sees it go, he crawls in pain to reach his gun and aim to wait for it. When it returns, he shoots it, but it attacks him more fiercely. He pretends to be dead again, and when it turns around to confirm its attack, he slowly aims his knife at it. He stabs it many times, and they break down, landing on top of him from a cliff. Other guys eventually locate Glass, who is lying under a dead bear. They remove the bear from Glass and attempt to treat his heavily bleeding wounds. Fitzgerald predicts he won't make it more than an hour, but Hawk stays close to console him. The leader of Arikara meets with the French to trade the animal skins seized from Glass's troop for firearms and horses. The French commander only provides them a few firearms because their skins have American stamps, but the chief begs to acquire the horses, so the French commander offers him 5 horses. They rest at night, with Hawk taking care of Glass. In the morning, they carry Glass on a homemade stretcher as they travel to their fort, but after a while, they find it difficult to climb with him up the mountain. He seems to be slowing them down, so Fitzgerald proposes that they either leave him behind or end his life to alleviate his suffering. As Captain Henry prepares to shoot him, he suddenly changes his mind and offers $75 to 2 individuals who choose to stay with him. Jim Bridger and Hawk choose to stay, and Fitzgerald also decides to stay after the captain raises the amount to $100. The captain cautions them about the dangers posed by the Arikara, and Hawk spends the night with Glass. Glass remembers the attack and burning of his town, the slaughter of his wife, and his survival with Hawk following his mother's death. In the morning, Fitzgerald digs a grave and begins to scare Jim with stories about how brutal the Arikara tribesmen are and what they would do to them if they found them, persuading him that they must go sooner. Fitzgerald spends a moment alone with Glass, persuading him to die so they can move on, and instructing him to let him kill him. Fitzgerald begins to suffocate Glass. Hawk approaches to beat him and calls Jim, who is down the stream and unable to hear him, giving Fitzgerald the opportunity to knife Hawk in the abdomen as Glass watches helplessly. Fitzgerald takes Hawk away, and after a while, Jim returns to search for Hawk. However, Fitzgerald claims not to know where Hawk is, and Glass is unable to provide him with the truth. In the morning, Fitzgerald informs Jim in a hurried way that the Arikara was approaching and that they must depart the area as soon as possible. However, when Jim inquires as to what they would do for Glass, Fitzgerald pulls him to the hole he dug earlier, claiming that this would slow them down. He partially buries him in the earth while Jim looks hesitantly, then leaves Glass with a bottle of water and follows Fitzgerald while Glass remains helpless. The captain and his crew continue to march to Fort Kiowa, while Glass struggles to rise up and begins to crawl out of the hole in vain. He begins tracking blood traces, and after crawling through the woods, he arrives at Hawk's corpse, which is frozen, and he remains by it, grieving after losing his final family member. Fitzgerald is still with Jim, whom he wakes up to continue their trek, but Jim questions him about the Arikara tribesmen he claimed were approaching, and it is discovered that Fitzgerald lied to him, prompting Jim to confront him. Fitzgerald suddenly takes over his rifle and warns him not to tell anybody that they abandoned Glass since he knew he would die anyhow, despite Jim's sadness. Glass, still holding Hawk's corpse, begins to feel cold and decides to bid farewell in vain, crawling for goods such as thick bear fur to keep warm. Fitzgerald and Jim are moving to Fort Kiowa, while Glass crawls to feed on bone marrow. The Arikara tribesmen come upon Hawk's body while searching for Pa'aka. Glass creeps towards the creek, where he takes a drink of water, seals his wounds with leftover gunpowder, and starts a fire for warmth. He sleeps behind a cliff at night. In the morning, he hears the Arikara tribesmen and hides under another cliff. When they arrive at the stream, Glass is forced to crawl beneath the cliff. When the search team approaches him, Glass decides to ride on the rapids to save himself. After successfully navigating the waterfalls, he secures himself onto a wooden plank and eventually reaches the shoreline. Glass walks to the creek to catch fish, and when he finds one, he eats it raw before straining to climb higher, where he encounters bison but is terrified of the wild wolves nearby. At night, while resting, he spots some flames, crawls up, hears someone fighting the wild dogs, and moves closer to see an Indian eating on a bison corpse. He exhibits no signs of injury and crawls to indicate for food, prompting the Indian to toss him an organ, which he devours ravenously. While the Indian stares at him in the morning, he discovers the wounds on his back, wakes him up, and informs him that a bear attacked him, revealing the scars from the attack. He informs him about his troops abandoning him to die after his family was killed, and he extends an invitation for him to join him. They continue on their journey together, and as the Indian tends to his wounds, Fitzgerald and Jim arrive in Fort Kiowa, but Fitzgerald tells Jim not to discuss Glass's case since they did what they had to. When Fitzgerald arrives, he informs Captain Henry that Glass died and they buried him properly, despite the fact that Hawk had simply vanished and they were afraid of falling into the Indians, which Captain Henry believes and moves to collect their payments as per the agreement, but when Jim sees the payments, he remains silent and upset and leaves the payments on the table to leave. The Indian takes some herbs, and the two of them settle down to catch snow, which makes Glass grin for a time before they continue on their trek. When the cold causes Glass to stumble and fall, the Indian ignites a fire, gathers materials to construct a shelter for the feverish Glass, and conducts a healing ceremony for his wounds. While sleeping, he has a vision of reconciling with Hawk, and when he wakes up in the morning, he is relieved to find that the Indian has already left. He continues on his trek, but soon discovers the Indian hung by the French for trapping at a nearby camp. The crew searching for Pa'aka learns about the French camp, where they are currently amusing themselves by holding a woman hostage. Glass advances silently to obtain one of their horses, but one Frenchman abruptly distances Pa'aka and assaults her as Glass sees. He crawls to silence him at gunpoint before leaving him with Pa'aka to find a horse for the escape, despite the fact that the other guys had heard the horses are unstable. Glass shoots one of them down to flee, but he accidentally drops the water bottle that Jim left with him. Fitzgerald is in a bar with Captain Henry, whom he asks for more payments for the skins, but Captain Henry informs him that he cannot be paid because he never brought any skin, which enrages Fitzgerald and causes him to leave. Pa'aka managed to escape as Glass rested in the jungle, but in the morning he was awakened by the squad hunting for Pa'aka, who attacked him. He manages to mount his horse and gallop away, but as the chase becomes tight, he accidentally falls down a cliff with his horse. Later, despite the horse's death, he finds himself still alive and freezing. This prompts him to cut the horse open, remove its organs, and sleep inside its corpse for warmth and survival. After some time, he goes outside to put on his clothing and say goodbye to the horse that saved his life before continuing on his way to Fort Kiowa through the snow. He spends the night beneath a cave and writes, "Fitzgerald killed my son." Later, a French hunter enters in search of food. As he sits down to talk to Captain Henry about the attack on their camp, he places a bottle on a table that Jim knows. The captain asks him where he obtained the bottle, which appears to be not far away, and he moves off to hunt Glass. Fitzgerald is concerned as the captain leads the search party into the forest, calling Glass all night as they shoot to startle him and then discover him hobbling towards them. In the morning, the irate captain arrives to search for Fitzgerald, only to find him nowhere. This prompts the French hunter to inform him that Fitzgerald has fled to Texas. He enters his office and discovers everything is unorganized, as well as the fact that he has looted all of their safes before leaving to face Jim for lying to him and ordering his arrest on charges of treason. Captain Henry sees Glass, who testifies for Jim's innocence, claims he was following orders and wasn't present when Fitzgerald stabbed Hawk, and requests a rifle and a horse to pursue Fitzgerald. The captain tells him he has to first recover, but Glass insists that he has nothing left to lose and that all he wants is retribution. In the morning, He refreshed himself and embarked on a chase with Captain Henry, but after following the path of his horse, they decided to split up for a more efficient search. Suddenly, Captain Henry approaches Fitzgerald, offering to return him to the fort for his charges. However, Fitzgerald refuses, prompting both of them to draw their firearms and engage in combat. Glass hears the gunshot and moves towards the location where Captain Henry is shot dead, but as he looks up the mountains, he detects falling snow and realizes Fitzgerald has gone up there. He carries the corpse of the captain on the horse and pauses to gather some branches for his trap. When Fitzgerald fires from a distance, he initially believes he has defeated him. However, upon closer inspection, he discovers that he has actually shot the captain's corpse, which Glass had disguised with a branch. This gave Glass the opportunity to shoot the in the arm before he fled into the wild. Glass follows him as he searches attentively with his rifle pulled ready. Fitzgerald hides beneath a tree as Glass pursues him intently. Suddenly, he finds him fleeing in the trees and pursues him again. Both of them race down the stream, but Fitzgerald is too exhausted to continue any longer, and when Glass approaches him, Fitzgerald reveals to him that he warned Hawk to be silent, but he refused. In a fit of rage, Glass attacks him for killing his child, sparking a violent altercation in which Glass wields an axe and Fitzgerald brandishes a dagger. They engage in a battle for a while, until Glass has the opportunity to stab him and then choke him to near death. However, when he sees the Arikara tribesman, he recalls the words, "Retribution is in God's hands." He draws him into the water, and when the Arikara catch him, they kill him. Glass glances at them as they cross the creek, but he knows Paaka, whom she rescued. They spare his life and go on because he also spared Paaka, despite having achieved his retribution. Glass is once again alone, roaming in the cold, and falls on the ground to witness a vision of his wife going into the light, putting the film to a conclusion. Thank you for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.